Mahalo for joining us today here at the Kapolei High School Teachers Lounge. For those of you who are here in person, and also to our online guests, we're glad you could join us in Zoom land. I'm Mike Gabbard, the state senator since 2006 for representing District 21, which includes Kapolei, Makakilo, Kalaeloa, where we live, have lived since 2004, and as well as Honokai Hale and portions of Fernandez Village and Eva. So I've been the chair of the Agriculture Environment Committee for the last 8 years. If you are interested in farming, please contact my office. Always looking to grow some more farmers to take advantage of all the empty ag land that's out there, just waiting for farmers. And for our first timers, our community meetings start promptly at 9 and then promptly at 10. If we don't cover an issue or concern that you have, please follow up with my office. Meg Turner, you'll see her there online, is in charge of Zooming all the Zoomers from home. She's there. And then Leah Bellard is my full-time legislative assistant. Leah was with me last session as my committee clerk for AEN, Agriculture Environment Committee, and she'll be assuming that role again this session. And Nanook Dene, there's Nanook. She is my part-time community liaison, and she's been with me since September. So we're going to start off with our guest speaker, Frank Genadio, who will provide an overview, history update, and information on the Makakilo Drive Completion, aka Makakilo Drive Extension project, and there'll be time for Q&A. Originally, we had planned to have Mick Ferreira, who's the transportation chair for I see he's there online. He's the transportation chair for the Kapolei Makakilo Neighborhood Board, to be our guest speaker, but unfortunately he had an accident. Hope you're mending well, Mick. And so Frank has graciously agreed to step in. And we did hear from Mick this morning, and yeah. I want to hear some more details about the accident, Mick, after the meeting, okay? Okay. And then afterwards, I'll give a brief community update, and then there'll be, if there's time, more Q&A at the end. And again, if you don't get your question answered, please contact my office and we'll follow up. And before I introduce Frank, quote unquote, formally, I want you to consider this. Hawaii has about 1.4 million people, as we know. There's 25 Senate districts. So that's about 56,000 people for each Senate district. I checked with the population of Makakilo. There's 21,523 people in Makakilo. And so nearly half of my district, District 21, is in Makakilo. So keep in mind that there's only one road in and one road out. And so now I'd like you to think about what happens if there's a wildfire or another natural disaster or whatever. And that's what I'd like you to think about as we listen carefully to Frank's presentation this morning. It is one of the top priorities on my to-do list. So Frank Genadio is a retired Air Force officer and Department of Defense contractor who has lived in Makakilo since September of 1992. He has been trying to persuade the County Department of Transportation Services to complete the Makakilo Drive Extension since 2001. Yes, you heard that right. 23 years ago, he's been working on this. So Frank also sits on the CAC, the Citizen Advisory Committee of OMPO, the Oahu Metropolitan Planning Organization, and representing Neighborhood Board 34, and is the perfect person to explain all of this. So mahalo for joining us this morning, Frank. The floor is all yours. Why don't we chat?
Good morning.
Over here, Frank.
I have to sit over there?
Yep, you're in on the Zoom.
Sorry.
Let's make sure you're right in there. Okay.
I'm not going to be doing anything exciting. I read in a monotone, but forgive me for that. As Senator Gabbard mentioned, I moved in here in September of 92. And a few months later, my wife and I got this magazine in the mail. A City Comes Into Being, Kapolei 1993. I'm not sure. I may be the only person left that still has this magazine, but the map in the middle. It's the Kapolei Area Long Range Master Plan, and it shows Makakilo Drive completed to the H1. And I told my wife, gee, in a few years, we'll have a shortcut into town because both of us worked in town at the time. Unfortunately, nothing's happened since then. I've got a little cheat sheet. I'm just going to be going from one thing to another, reading to you. I was busy working, didn't have time to really delve into getting the road, wondering why nothing was happening. I finally retired from full-time work in late 2000. And in 2001, I went to a meeting down at Blaisdell Center for something called the, excuse me, Transportation for Oahu Plan 2025. In the book that they gave us, there was this page. It says, Project D14 Makakilo Drive Extension, second access. The estimated cost was $8.5 million. And they said that the feds would probably give us about 80%. So I said, gee, that ought to be really good. And nothing happened. They had written it up as the North-South Road and Interchange, Kapolei Interchange, Kapolei Parkway Extension to Eva Beach, and Maka Frontage Road from Makakilo Drive to Kalealoa Boulevard are also listed. Not in the top 2025 was what was then called the East-West Road, Kapolei Parkway Extension through West Kapolei, Kamakilo Boulevard, a Roosevelt Road connection, or Kama'aha Avenue. All of these projects have been completed, and we haven't even started the Makakilo Drive completion. Pardon me, the projects were listed top 2025, meant they would all be completed by 2025. We're actually already in federal fiscal year 2025, and we haven't even changed anything. In 2004, Castle and Cook announced that they would be building an extension to the road so that they could develop 270 new homes at the top of the hill. They extended the road a little over 2,000 feet, and it was done leaving us with 4,000 linear feet to the, or about 2/3 of a mile to the interchange, and we're still waiting. In 2005, I joined what Senator Gabbard mentioned, the Citizen Advisory Committee to the Oahu Metropolitan Planning Organization, or OMPO, and advised to what was then called the Policy Committee. It's now known as the Policy Board. And one of the things we did was prioritize all the projects on Oahu. And there were 3 categories. Makakilo Drive was put in as the #1 project in the #1 category of projects. It was sent to the policy committee, which was then headed by our council member, Nestor Garcia. And even as chair, he could not get anything done. And we waited until something called the Transportation Improvement Program, which is the key to putting projects under funding. And finally, in fiscal years 2006 to 2008, the program, or the TIP as it's known, pardon me, was put in. It showed $375,000 for planning, with 80% federal funding, and nothing yet for design and construction. The city then held meetings with us starting in December 11, 2007, They came to Makakilo. It was headed by the Department of Transportation Services, or DTS, and about 25 to 30 of us showed up for the meetings. They were headed by contractors making presentations. Brian Suzuki of DTS, Brian Takeda, and Craig Luth. They said the scope would be a 4-lane roadway from the end of the Castle and Cook project extension down to the new north-south road interchange at H1. Mr. Suzuki later mentioned in an interview with KHON that he was hoping for construction in 2014, 2015. For those of us at the time, we thought, gee, that's awfully late because we were hoping it'd be sooner. And that was a decade ago. Additional meetings were held in 2008. And at the last meeting, the drive's extension was projected for environmental assessment, or EA, in November 2008. A final plan in January 2009, final EA in March, design start in May, and construction start in 2011, with development expected to take 2 years. One of the keys to our heartburn over this is that the State Department of Transportation, or HDOT, completed the Kualakai interchange in January of 2010, on time and within budget. So it's been 14 and a half years that interchange has sat there without the connection. On I go. I don't know if you've seen the rubber cables that go across the road here and there. Those are called screen line counters, and they count the number of vehicles going over them. In 2010, on the drive, somewhere around where the market is, they counted 16,000 vehicles each way on a weekday. I don't know what it is now. I just came down the hill, and there must have been 40 cars lined up to go onto the H1 on a Saturday. Where they're all going, I don't know, but that interchange, it just becomes more and more congested. RM Towel, this is from Council Member Tupola. It's kind of an information guide. And they assigned RM Towel, they were hired for $3 million to do pre-engineering, topographic survey, mapping, civil engineering, design, soil engineering, structural engineering, and landscape architecture. Over the years, they put $6+ million into the transportation improvement program just for the design. We are still without a final design. We don't know what RM Towel is doing. We've brought it up at the neighborhood board meetings. Where is the final design? We think there's probably some man or woman hidden in a basement somewhere that DTS is keeping us from seeing, because without the final design, we can't ask for construction. And we've asked for them to come to the board and brief us, and nothing. I will now back up to the fiscal years 2011 through 2016. And in the tip, they actually programmed money, not just for the design, but also for construction. And in fiscal year 2013, there was $25 million, 14, $22 million, 16, $47 million. This is for a road that they said would be $8.5 million back in 2001. We then waited for something to happen. Nothing was moving all through that decade until finally the tip now no longer had the drive. The design is dragged on. Once there was a bridge included, that was removed. And one can only surmise that Towel has minimal personnel assigned to the final design. And whether or not DTS is purposely keeping them from finishing the final design, and more on that later. At every annual meeting of the Ballyhua Community Association, the project is discussed. The PCA, by the way, represents more than 3,600 homes, most of them in Upper Makakilo, i.e. above the fire station. Neighborhood, they've sent letters to the city saying, we want to see this done. Neighborhood Board 34, you're familiar with, Makakilo-Kapolei Honokai Hale. We've had multiple resolutions going in, calling for the city to extend and complete the drive. Meanwhile, Koalakai Parkway provides a convenient access to H1 for the newer residents occupying Ho'opili and nearby Department of Hawaiian Homeland's home, basically giving them a head start on commuters from Makakilo that be entering one interchange west of where we enter the road. Finally, spurred on by Transportation Chair Ferrara, an effort was made in this year's legislature with our representative senators backing it to move the drive's responsibility from the Department of Transportation Services to the Hawaii Department of Transportation, because the state seems to have more money for these projects. Needless to say, the HDOT director opposed it, and the resolution never got out of committee. So we're still left with it funded by DTS and unfortunately unfunded. We've tried, several of us have tried to do something about it by getting some PR, public relations. And over the years, we've had some success in that. And I'll go through a few of these. This was in Honolulu Civil Beat, and Mr. Ferrara had a commentary. Why is the Makakilo Extension project still in limbo? I'll just read a few excerpts from it. It said, there is no reason not to build the extension other than what color the money is. Everybody has agreed the extension is needed. Two reports, one by RM Towel and the other by the Honolulu Department of Transportation Services, describe Makakilo Drive as being in a built-out area, and there is nothing that could be done to make it safer, save for extending it. Consider for a moment that there are no special tax districts here like they have in California, where they charge developers per new house for the infrastructure needed to support their projects, and it is passed on to the new homeowners. Just an aside, and Mick mentioned it here. When the Castle and Cook homes were being put in, the realtors were told, tell the homeowners that they would soon have a road going down to the interchange. And of course, they're the closest homes in Upper Makakilo to the road. And that was in 2002. And one of the realtors was Jack Legal, who felt like he was lying to them, and he's mentioned that in the past. But that was what was anticipated by Castle and Cook. So Mick mentioned that there's a bigger groundswell forming among Makakilo residents who want the extension. Mayor Rick Blangiardi decided early in 2023 to have town hall meetings. He didn't have one in Kapolei itself, but he had one in Eva, and several of us went there and testified to him. By the way, at these meetings, he had all his directors there, like Managing Director Mike Formby, who's important, and the Department of Transportation Services Director Roger Morton. Sort of the key to this whole thing, and more on him later. I testified, and just a couple of excerpts. I said, many of the roads shown in the magazine, which were not even listed in the Transportation for Oahu plan, have now already been completed, but the drive remains incomplete. I said, we've asked DTS for a new screen line count between the H1 exit and the first light below Palilai, but perhaps they do not want to see the post-COVID numbers. They have put screen line counters on the access to H1. You may have seen them up near the market, but they haven't put one between the exit from H1 and the first light, because that's the key to finding out how many drivers are going up and down the hill every day. And so I couldn't tell you what the number is. Senator Gabbard mentioned there's now over 21,000 people in the on the hill. So there are a lot of drivers. I also said, Mr. Mayor, you need to be aware of the straight shot that commuters and the bus would have from the top of the hill to the park and ride lot of the UH West Oahu rail station, which is now in service. Several months ago, DTS Director Morton cited a priority for the widening of Salt Lake Boulevard, an $80 million project, and a lack of funds preventing completion of the Makakilo extension. Salt Lake widening will be nice to have, but there already is a 2-lane road there, while we have nothing but dirt. And a simple roadway of 4,000 feet here should not take longer than 2 years. We then, at the meeting, another testifier invited the mayor to come to Makakilo. And the mayor said, okay. And maybe 6 or 7 weeks later, he showed up with Managing Director Formby and the deputy for DTS, Noichi. We had about 5 or 6 of us there. We met in the rec center. We talked for a while. We then went down to the end of the road and showed him exactly what we were doing. And the mayor said, perhaps we can find funding for this. That was about May of 2023. And we're still waiting. Later, a couple of months later, I was called by KHON and asked to meet, I think, Jen Bonesa, reporter. And so I was on TV pointing out from an overlook of the end of the road what we were trying to do. So just one more PR effort.
Frank Genadio bought his home in Makakilo in 1992 when he was just 59 years old.
I'm now 90, and I'm still waiting for this road.
For years, residents like Genadio were sold on the idea of a road connecting Makakilo Drive directly to the H1, but it hasn't come to pass.
The single access for the 20,000 people here in Makakilo is both a congestion management and a safety issue.
He says a fire, earthquake, or other disaster along Makakilo Drive could trap residents without a bypass.
Makakilo Drive currently ends abruptly in a cul-de-sac, but if you look just beyond the trees, you can actually see the H1 freeway not far down below.
This is where the bypass road would likely go, connecting Makakilo Drive directly to the H1 interchange. According to Genadio, just 4,000 linear feet separates them. I sat down with Roger Morton, Department of Transportation Services Director. He says there are 2 ways to build it, and from an engineering standpoint, both are complicated.
One option is we could build a 7/10 of a mile bridge and take it down that way. Another option would be that we could fill in the gulch
both of them are exceptionally expensive.
Addressing cultural and historical concerns in the area only add to the price tag. Morton estimates the cost at $200 million, though he says it could happen down the road. Finding that kind of money now is the real problem.
We have many projects. We have Salt Lake widening going on. We have Farrington Highway, and there just isn't funding right now.
That doesn't sit well with Genadio.
The money that they're spending right now is for the widening of Salt Lake Boulevard, for example. That's a nice-to-have project, but there's already a road there. But we don't have the road we need.
He also points out the newly funded Hawai pedestrian bridge.
Apparently, bicycles and pedestrians have priority over the drivers here in Makakilo.
Still, he's holding on to hope.
I don't know if it'll come before I pass on or not, but there's a lot of people on the hill who would like to see this road completed.
In addition to funding and support from the state, the project would also need a new environmental assessment and completed design.
We then, in August of 2023, Chair Ferrara and myself and another resident named John Shockley authored a commentary for the Star Advertiser, and they actually published it. I'll just read a couple of excerpts from that. Given the disaster in Lahaina, the Makakilo Drive extension is a critical safety issue. We lost track of the number of new roadways developed on the Ewa Plain that were not on the Kapolei Long Range Plan or even in the top 2025. And we wrote that despair reigned on the Hill until early this year. This is 2023, when revision 11 of the current TIP included $545+ million in federal funds from the bipartisan infrastructure law that was allocated to unspecified Oahu road projects. That money has been going into what they call transportation alternatives. In other words, helping bicycle and pedestrian efforts, but not roadways. I mentioned that we met with the mayor. We put that in the commentary. And we pointed out that the extension would have a positive impact on rail ridership with a bus feeder to the station, which would be about 1.25 miles from the existing end of Makakilo Drive. And not only would it save a lot of gas, but it would make people use the rail more and get there faster. The mayor indicated funding could be found. However, OMPO is funding transportation alternatives, such as bicycle and pedestrian projects, including a $64 million bridge over the Hawai Canal. And by the way, I've heard residents from the other side of the canal, the Mauka side of the canal, say, we don't really want that bridge. We don't want people coming in from Waikiki easily. And there already is a bridge over at Macaulay, and there's the roadway at the end of the canal, but they're determined to put this bridge in, and it has a fancy looking design. People say, what do you need that design for a simple pedestrian bridge? But apparently drivers no longer have priority on Oahu. And the Lahaina disaster reminded us of a past brush fire on top of our hill, fought by many fire trucks. Had the single access been blocked, we would probably have lost many homes. I live not far from that. Over the next 3 days, we had something like 40 fire trucks coming from, I believe, 12 different companies, and they all came up Makakilo Drive. If the drive were blocked, and if the wind were from a different direction, there were trades, so the fire was blown into the ravine. If they were in an opposite direction, they would have ignited those homes on top of the hill. By the way, the fire was started by a couple of twin boys playing with a cigarette lighter. But anyway, fortunately, there was only minimal damage to the one home. But if those fire trucks could not have gotten up Makakilo Drive, I'm not sure what the result would have been. We also had the civil beat looking into it, and I don't know if you're familiar with Marcel Honore. He used to be a reporter for the Star Advertiser. He's now on civil beat, and he penned this commentary in October 23. After Lahaina, Makakilo residents press harder for another exit off their hill. And he said, after Lahaina, people feel more at risk. Makakilo resident Deborah Aglis said, we've had fires out here for a long time. It's a dry, hot area. And some fear they would face a similar traffic nightmare as those who fled the fire August 8th at Lahaina, based on the gridlock they encounter whenever there's a bad vehicle crash. Aglis said she first heard of plans to extend Makakilo Drive and open it around a second access point when she bought her home there in 1983. I actually met a lady at the neighborhood board who said, you know, they've been talking about that since 1978. It seems that people here in Makakilo and Kapolei are second-class citizens, and whatever they want downtown, we've taken a back seat to. In recent years, the project has stalled in the design phase. Residents say they've had a difficult time getting answers from the city about why. And RM Towell referred all questions regarding the extension project to the city. Still, some Makakilo residents, including John and Rita Shockley, have wondered whether the recent influx of more than $1.4 billion to Hawaii through the Federal Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act could help make the extension happen. For the extension to get done, Oahu's transportation leaders first need to add it back onto the tip, which gets updated every 3 years. I might add that the tip can be revised at any time. It's not a set document for those 3 years. In fact, I think now they've changed it to a 4-year plan. The current one is federal fiscal years 25 to 28. And the federal fiscal year, by the way, starts in a couple of days, October 1st. But if they want to change, they can get it done through a revision. So typically, the document is revised sometimes once a quarter, perhaps, with sometimes just admin changes, sometimes new projects. So if we could possibly get the funding, we get the OMPO policy board to approve it, we could get it in the tip. And I was even quoted in there that members of the advisory committee have no clout whatsoever. That's the citizen advisory committee that Senator Gabbard mentioned earlier. The mayor invited Chair Ferrara and I to a meeting at Honolulu Hale in July of this year. And his director, Formby, and Director Morton were also there, as well as a couple of staffers from Councilmember Topola's office. And it was mentioned that discretionary funding comes from DC because it was brought up there are funds, there are federal funds, and somehow or other they can be funneled into the project. If anybody among you has a way of doing that, that'd be great. The only positive thing we heard from it, Mike Formby said, Perhaps we can locally fund the environmental assessment, and so we could go ahead with it. There's I'll mention it later, a catch-22 about this. The federal infrastructure grants are sizable. However, they're difficult to attain. So whether there's an opportunity there or not remains to be seen. We haven't given up. Chair Ferrara, John Shockley, and I put together another commentary recently. We submitted it, and surprisingly, they put it in the paper within days. It's past time to extend Makakilo Drive. A few more exits. More than a year ago, our commentary involving the completion of 4,000 linear feet of roadway from Makakilo Drive to the H1 Koalakai Parkway interchange was published. No progress is made since then, and now local residents are confronted with a state plan development for up to 900 affordable housing units on 20+ acres across from the Kapolei Walmart, adjacent to one of the busiest intersections on the island, Barrington Highway and Makakilo Drive / Port Barrett Road. The legislature was asked to change responsibility for the drive's completion from DTS to the Hawaii Department of Transportation Services, and the bill never saw the light of day. You heard that before. A few months ago, our neighborhood board was briefed on this housing project with its completion at the end of the decade. At the August board meeting, the project, which is now known as Makakilo-Kapolei, was again briefed. This time, the developer's spokesman updated that he expected the first phase, 272 units, to be completed by 2027. This is not good news for Makakilo residents, especially the town-bound commuters who use the Makakilo Drive access to H1 freeway. We anticipate affordable housing units will each have 2 wage earners, and as Kapolei Property Development once indicated, there will be 1 new job created in the area for each new resident. That means at least 1 new commuter exiting onto Fort Barrett Road each morning, heading for the eastbound H1 entrance. Reactions at the neighborhood board meeting and later on the internet focused on local opposition to Makakilo-Kapolei, especially if the second access for Makakilo Drive is not completed before the first phase units open. We all understand the need for affordable housing, but just adding residential units without developing complementary infrastructure, in this case a roadway, is not acceptable. And August also brought local residents unwelcome news that the Makakilo quarry operation has been extended, as well as a decision-making extension about the life of the landfill in Kapolei. Good news is long overdue for long-suffering leeward residents. It is now more than 32 years since the project first appeared on Kapolei's Transportation Master Plan. We wanted immediately onto a revised transportation improvement program with a completed environmental assessment and final design before the end of this year, assign a project manager, and start construction in January 2025. This is not elevated rail or a new stadium project. It is a simple roadway as a second access for safety and for traffic congestion management, making it eligible for federal funding support. For those who believe Makakilo Drive cannot be completed in 2 years, think about the completion of the Empire State Building in 14 months and the Pentagon in 16 months. Are we no longer capable of untimely development? And finally, let me just summarize that last year, the mayor indicated that funds ought to be available to complete the project. However, nothing has materialized. New federal funding added $545 million to the Transportation Improvement Program for 6 state and city projects, much of it for bicycle lanes and pedestrian bridges, but the drive was excluded. DTS Director Roger Morton refers to our situation as a catch-22. For example, an environmental assessment is needed before the project is added to the tip, but according to him, a project must be in the tip before the assessment can be done. I'm not sure why all these other projects don't have the same kind of problems. My personal feeling is that DTS does not want to put any money into the drive because it'd rather put it into other projects. Everyone is aware of the safety implications of having one access for 20,000 residents in homes that were threatened in the past by brush fires. However, it also is a major congestion management issue. Both issues qualify the project for federal funding support. A completed drive would save any town-bound commuters between 2 and 10 miles on their daily round trip, depending on their position on the hill. Along with the time saved, millions of gallons of gasoline have been consumed in the 14 and a half years since the Kewalakai interchange opened. We must push for completion of the final design and environmental assessment so that construction funding can be placed in the tip, which is controlled by OMPO's policy board. The decision makers on that board are 11 voting members: the DTS director, the HDOT director, the HART CEO, the planning director, 3 members of the city council, 2 members of the Senate, and 2 members of the House of Representatives. If we see no progress, we must oppose any new housing projects in the area, as well as any new roadways. Many homes are already going up on the Mackay side of Kapolei Parkway, as you've seen, but we can oppose the plan across from Walmart. I found it funny that a week after our commentary that asked how residents of Kailua, Manoa, and Kahala would react to 900 new housing units in their neighborhoods, a Manoa resident wrote opposing 172 units on the old St. Francis school site. By the way, that site is about 11 acres, roughly half of the Walmart site. So on a basis of scale, they should be putting in 450 units rather than just 170 something. As for the roads, I, for one, will really be upset if out of nowhere, ground is broken for extending Kapolei Parkway toward Ko'olina. Finally, there is strength in numbers. I can remember when job-seeking union members covered all 3 levels of Honolulu Hale to support a city council vote on the rail project. The Palihua Community Association has over 3,600 home-owning members, mostly above the fire station. Instead of having a few of us involved, even 10% of the PCA members converged on a policy board meeting, we might see some results. Mahalo for your time.
Any questions for Frank?
Thanks, Frank, for that great presentation. Oh, sorry, Mickey.
Mickey, if
Yeah.
you wouldn't mind just going up front, just so that people on the Zoom.
You want me to move out of, move
You
over
don't need to
one?
be on camera, no, that's fine.
This way?
That's fine, either way.
Okay,
Oh,
yeah,
yeah.
I'll go this
No.
way. Right, fast question is, do you need the design plans from Towel to get on the tip?
They've told us that we have to have a final design before they would allocate construction funding. So as you know, we've asked for this final design, I don't know how many times, and we don't even know who the person might be that's doing anything. He may not even exist. We just don't know. But I think the neighborhood board should say, where is the gentleman or lady from RM Towel to show us what the final design looks like?
That's what I'm thinking. I'm thinking
Yeah.
you need that design.
Yeah. And you'd have heard them talk about complete streets.
Yes.
So that means a sidewalk and so forth and a bike lane. And there's no reason why they can't make the final design a complete street. I still believe they don't want that final design completed, because then we would start talking about construction funding.
That's what it looks like. Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.
Anything else?
I think Mick is trying to,
Okay.
Sorry.
I don't know how you do that.
I can help you here.
So good.
I think Meg, are you
Yeah, Mick can go ahead and chime in. It's cool.
Okay. Yeah, so when we had that meeting, where we left off was that we were supposed to get something from DTS, from somebody there who could review and approve the environmental report, so that then RM Towel can then complete their design. I have to follow up and find out. We're supposed to have a meeting with the person to find out, okay, what do we need to do to complete the environmental report. And so that's where it's at right now. So one thing that Mike Formby did was he chimed in and said, it looks like we're in a catch-22 and we need to break this catch-22. And they said they couldn't complete the environmental report because what was it? Because it had to be on the tip, right? And it's like, because
Yep.
it's going for federal funding. So we decided to say, okay, we're going for local funding, so we don't have that problem. And please complete the environmental assessment so that we can get it on the tip. And then once it's on the tip, we can go for local money, but then we can go and look for federal grant money. And so that's kind of where it's at right now. And what I have to do, or one of us has to do, is go back to DTS and say, hey, where's our environmental assessment? And we need there's an appointment that we need to, share to get that on finally. So we found a way forward. It hasn't been completed. Oh, and
Remember, Mick, it was Mike Formby who said maybe they could find the money to do the environmental assessment. Maybe we should lean on him. Are you mobile, by the way?
I'm sitting here in front of a walker with my leg up, and I've got a shattered ankle and contusions and road rash from hitting a car that was making a left turn.
Well,
Yeah.
anybody else?
Oh,
Yeah,
and plus
I got a
two,
question. Go ahead,
on the
Nick.
Kilo thing, talking to EMS people, one of the things about it was that it would make it 1 mile closer to the hospital if they didn't have to go all the way to the Makakilo exit. And if the extension was completed, they could just get off there and come up through the back of Makakilo Drive, and then leaving Makakilo, they can go back out. So they're saving a mile. If you're having a heart attack or a stroke, that 2 miles that they have to go out of their way could be the matter of life and death. And I was told off the record that there has been a couple of people that never made it to the hospital. And one of the things that could have happened is if the hospital was closer. Well, we make the hospital closer by making the on-ramp to the freeway closer, right? So you end up gaining a mile. But yeah, that's anecdotal. So
Actually, Mick,
Come on over
the
here, Frank, so we can get you in closer. Frank.
the closest to the hospital for people at the very end of the drive in the Newcastle Cook development, it's a 5 mile difference from where they are to Queens West than it would be if they had the extension.
right. And we are an aging population here in Makakilo, I see. I do see some young families and things like that, but between you, me, and the senator, we're looking pretty good.
I resemble that remark.
I got a question for Mick and for Frank, and that is, as you guys know, I introduced that reso in the Senate, changing from city and county to Department of Transit to the state. And it passed the Senate, but it didn't get past the House at the last minute. Do you guys still recommend that we shift responsibility for ND over to the state, to DOT, or keep it where it is?
My personal preference?
Yes.
I would like to see the state have it, because I don't think DTS wants to do that. They'll do whatever they can to keep from having it done.
Well,
However, the mayor should weigh in on that.
Yeah. Yeah. Mick?
the state has to be involved anyway, the HDOT in building it. So if they're, pushing the charge to do it, the one thing that we had as a handicap when you did that reso is when it went to the House, we have a rather rookie representative out of Kapolei all the way to Nanakuli, and he's also on the chair of the OMPO
The policy board.
board. So what he did was he said, well, we need the money out here in the west side to make improvements, and your projects are nice to have. And he ended up, it was going to go to committee, and he went to his chair and killed it. And that's going to be our roadblock. And if I can't get around that roadblock of him not wanting to participate, that's going to be the tough part on the state side. But it seems as if we just keep working on it, if I can work on it from both ends, we'll eventually see some daylight. But I'm thinking we got to lean really hard on DTS to get the environmental assessment completed so it can put the project back on the tip.
Okay, so thank you very much, gentlemen. And then we can talk about this offline in terms of strategy. Session starts January 15th, and I'm more than willing to talk to the
But
guy in
can
the
I add
house.
just one thing?
Sure.
Included in the current tip, and somebody brought it up on the Nextdoor Digest yesterday. She said, is it true that they want a bike lane from Nanakuli to UH Manoa?
Yep.
The fact is,
Saw that.
yes, it is true. The current tip has a bike lane shown on its map. And I forget, but something like they'll allocate $160 million or something to put this bike lane in. I can't imagine anybody commuting by bicycle from Nanakuli to downtown or to UH Manoa. Yes, ma'am, there's a question.
Yes, ma'am.
Not a question, just a comment. And it's a simple comment. I attended one neighborhood board when they discussed the 900 affordable.
Ma'am, would you come up here, please, so they can hear you at home? Thank you. Sit right. Yeah.
I'm one of the aging squeaky wheels.
Okay.
Okay. I attended a neighborhood board meeting where they presented the proposed building across from Kapolei, Walmart. And I could not believe that they would even consider that without discussing it with the state about if only one unit had one child, what it would do to our school system. But worse yet, if they came down Makakilo and suddenly saw that if you wanted to go to eastbound, you only had one lane that had a curve, a very large curve, and that you entered competing to enter H1 from the Barber's Point with all the big trucks and the people from lower Kapolei all converging into about 2 lanes, how they would feel if they had to live here. I mean, honestly, they're asking us to go down a roadway that is about 35 years old and is totally impractical. It's a miracle we don't have more accidents. And frankly, with 3,600 homeowners, you would think, and all of them have more than one car.
Okay.
And many of them have children. Some units have 5 cars and 5 drivers. They're all going the same direction. Nobody thought to do the rail from Nanakuli or Makaha and past Ko'olina all the way into UH West. No, they built a bridge across from Ala Moana near Ward Avenue, I believe, or Kukui,
Yes.
across to Ala Moana Beach. It's not even across the Hawai. It's across from the shopping center to Ala Moana Beach Park for the convenience of the high def.
Yeah, it's actually a little
High
further
rises.
down.
Yes.
Like at the Diamond Head side of Fisherman's
Right.
Wharf is where the.
And I'm sitting there going, oh, that's lovely. When I brought this up at the neighborhood board, whoever was representing Mayor Blangiardi sniffed. He says, well, you know, it's a nice to, she said it was a nice to have. It is a nice to have. I used to have to commute and go very early in the morning just to get to my job in town. I'm retired now, but it's a miracle we all don't have more accidents coming from Makakilo or going from Kapolei.
You know, like, I loved my job. The reason I retired, I got so tired of fighting the H1, H2 merge every morning at 6. I decided I didn't need it anymore.
Oh, I just decided to go down Dillingham and turn into town because it was a lot easier. And this was before they had, and I never could get onto the high
May I
road.
add?
So, you know,
Sure.
So-
Thank you. Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, so one of the things that the neighborhood board was kind of disappointed in is that the HHFDC, which is the one who put out the request for maybe an RFC or RFP, they never went to the neighborhood board to say they had a project like this on the table. And they went out and found the contractor, the developer, and awarded it. They never came to us and said, hey, this is what we're working on. What do you think? And so I think it's kind of unfair to the developer that this is going to get a lot of opposition because the HHFDC awarded this without consulting with local residents. So that's I think the main gripe I've got about it. So
Yeah.
they
Okay.
still, yeah, they still got to get permits from town. So if they can't get the permits, they can't build. So we're going to attack it from all angles.
Yeah, so important to reach out to the community on these major projects, just to, yeah. I mean,
What's hard is people have not just one job, sometimes 2, kids in school. They can't get involved. Just like when I worked full time, I didn't have time to get involved. And so the older folks have the time, but getting a group of people to go down to the policy board usually meets in a room in the state legislature. Can you imagine what they would think if there were, as I mentioned, 10% of the PCA homeowners or 360 people in the room and in the hallways and saying, give us this
and
project.
you know, Frank, you're absolutely right, because as a legislator, when there are bills that are in front of all the various committees and things, it's numbers matter. You know?
Yeah.
I mean, it's also the quality of the testimony. For example, I've learned over the years that when you have, let's say middle school kids coming in and testifying, and I've looked over at some of my committee members and some of them are in tears, but you do whatever you got to do to get the bills passed. So numbers and the quality of the testimony, it really makes a difference.
Yeah.
And so that's why when you have 300 people or 500 people to show up and all the committee members are going, this seems like to be a pretty important bill, or we better seriously, because there's over 3,000 bills introduced every single session of the ledge, right?
Yeah.
So,
Which is mind blowing.
yeah, it is. But that's, yeah. And that's where public participation in the process is so important. Yeah, it's so important.
And
Okay, thank you.
on the neighborhood board, what I run into quite a bit is there's a lot of people that want certain things like a dog park or the Makakilo extension, and they expect us to do the heavy lifting.
Right.
When it's like, no, I'll get this, I'll talk to my senator and get this introduced, but I need you guys to write testimony. I need you guys to show up would be even better. So that when one of these bills die, it's because there's a lack of interest in it. And these committees just go, well, I've got 3 or 4 letters from the normal people who write these letters that are, you know, the directors of transportation, that type of thing, and opposing things. And then, so the numbers do matter. You get more testimony and letters from people opposing it that, you know, they're set up to be able to write those letters. They look over things. I do that at work for the DLNR, and we look at anything that affects the DLNR and we write the letters. You know, it gets our director's, our chair's name on it, and it goes over. So That's really important.
Yeah.
So people that really want it, if you want it, stay tuned on next door. And when we need things done, then we can announce it and maybe get some reaction.
Yeah.
That's
Great.
all.
Thanks, Nick.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. And again, I'd like to thank Frank and also Mick for your input on the MDC, Makakilo Drive Completion.
Completion.
You understand the difference between the extension and the completion, because it's right.
Right.
And any other things that you'd like to, we're just about out of time. You'd like to bring up today? We're out of time in terms of the updates as far as what's going on, but I could do that at our next meeting in next month. Any other issues that you'd like to bring up? Okay, there is I wanted to announce for those of you that have the time today, between 10 and 2 o'clock at Kapolei Regional Park, there's a Celebrate One Water event going on. The Board of Water Supply is putting this on. There are games and activities, workshops, adopt a park, and basically encouraging people to understand the importance of water here in our state. And it's called, the theme is Imagine a Day Without Water, 2024. And then I also wanted to announce next Saturday at Kamakanali'i Shopping Center, there'll be a climate change commission is sponsoring it. I'm a member of that committee, but it's going to be a free to the public. There'll be interactive booths showing what each of us can do to become better stewards for our Aina. And that will be, next Saturday from 10 a.m. to 3 p.m. at Kamakanali'i.
Where? What part of the shopping center?
Yeah, it doesn't say. I'm sure they'll have it. Yeah, if you're interested, just contact the office and we'll let you know. Okay, so thank you all for coming, and we'll see you next time. Aloha. Aloha.
Thank you.